Officer doubted her extraction plan, until Command approved it, word for word. You want to walk me through this again, sweetheart? Because whatever you drew on that napkin doesn't look like an extraction plan. It looks like a grocery list. The words cut through the war room like a blade scraping metal, slow and deliberate, leaving a silence that had weight and edges. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale stood at the head of the briefing table with his arms crossed like he owned not just this forward operating base, but the entire Southern Theater of Operations. 3 rows of service ribbons pressed flat against his chest. His shadow fell across the tactical map she had spread on the table, fell across it and covered it completely, the way his presence was designed to cover anything smaller than himself. 47 people occupied the room, 12 senior planners, 22 support personnel, 8 intelligence analysts whose clipboards had stopped moving the moment Hale spoke, 5 communications officers near the back wall who exchanged glances they thought were private. The air smelled of burnt coffee, industrial floor cleaner, and the specific tension that collects in rooms where someone with authority has just made a public mistake and doesn't know it yet. Captain Elena Vasquez did not look up. She was 31 years old, with dark hair pulled into a regulation bun so precise it looked architectural. 5'4", plain olive drab uniform with no rank insignia beyond her captain's bars. No unit patches. No awards clusters. She wore the kind of stillness that isn't practiced, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than training, the kind that makes observers wonder what's underneath it. Her hands were positioned on the edges of the tactical map with a flat, controlled grip. Specific grip. The spacing of her fingers, the angle of her wrists, belonged to someone who had been trained at schools most people in this room had never heard of. She finished writing a coordinate. Then she put her pen down. Then she looked up. "The plan is sound, sir." Her voice was the same temperature as the room. Not cold, not warm. Calibrated. Hale's jaw tightened. He glanced at the 12 senior planners. He needed them watching, and they were. The kind of man who only performs when he has an audience, and who always makes sure he has one. "Sound," he repeated, drawing the word out. 3 operators, 1 vehicle, a 4-kilometer window through active hostile territory in 17 minutes. He picked up the edge of the map and turned it toward the room. "This is amateur theater, Captain. This is the kind of plan that gets people killed and then gets classified so nobody has to explain why." In the far corner of the room, near the secondary communications terminal, a man named Chief Warrant Officer Dale Reeves set his coffee mug down without making a sound. He was 61 years old, 34 years in service, the kind of face that had seen enough operations to know what competence looks like before it opens its mouth, the kind of stillness that comes from the same place hers did, just older, settled deeper into the bones. He had been watching her since she walked in. He had noticed the grip first, then the way she'd glanced at the communications officer's equipment and immediately known which channel was broadcasting interference. She'd shifted slightly, without a word, without being asked, away from the frequency that was cluttering the channel they needed. Nobody else in the room had noticed. He had. He noticed things. 34 years had made noticing things the same as breathing. His pen had stopped moving 3 minutes ago. He said nothing. He watched. Vasquez looked at the map, then at Hale. She did not raise her voice. "The 4-kilometer window closes in 17 minutes, she said. After that, it's 6 kilometers and 22. The math gets worse the longer we discuss it. I'm not discussing anything with you." Hale pulled the map entirely off the table. "I'm telling you this plan goes nowhere. You go nowhere. Whatever cleared you to be in this room, I'm questioning it. Formally, on record. You're a support attachment. You input coordinates. You don't design operations. He turned back to his planners. He was already moving on. The scene was over in his mind. Vasquez picked up her pen. She breathed in. 4 counts. Hold 4. 4 out. Hold 4. The plan is already filed, she said quietly, to his back. He stopped. Filed with whom? Command. The word landed in the room and sat there. Hale turned around slowly. The 12 senior planners were very still. I'm command, he said. I haven't approved anything. Not this command, sir. He stared at her. She met it evenly, without interest. Get her out of my war room, he said. By 1400, the story had already made its way through the mess hall. The version circulating had been embellished the way stories always are on operating bases. Distance makes details bolder. In the version that reached the maintenance crew, she had actually laughed at him. In the version that reached the communications wing, she had laid the map back on the table and told him to his face that he didn't have the clearance to understand it. Neither was true. The truth was smaller and, in certain ways, more damaging to him. She sat in the officers' mess at a corner table, alone, eating something that had the texture of rice and the ambition of protein. The kind of meal designed for sustenance rather than pleasure. She ate without looking at the food. She was listening. 12 conversations at various distances. She filed them the way she filed everything, patterns, not content. Who deferred to whom? Where the real decisions moved before they surfaced in meetings. Which personnel clustered near which exits when authority was in the room. She had been doing intelligence work since she walked through the front gate. Appearing to be an isolated target was the most efficient intelligence posture she knew. At 1340, one of Hale's junior officers, a lieutenant named Garrett, the kind of young officer who mirrors whatever confidence is directly above him, walked by her table and said, loud enough for the 4 nearby tables to hear, something about the junior support staff getting lost on the way to the filing room. 3 people laughed. Not at the joke, at the specific relief of laughing alongside authority. She did not look up from her food. 2 tables away, a senior non-commissioned officer named Dominguez, 22 years in, the kind of face that had processed a lot of other people's mistakes, watched Garrett walk away and did not laugh. He looked at his tray. His jaw was tight. He knew what this was. He'd seen it before. It never ended the way the people laughing expected it to. She had already noted Dominguez. Not a threat. Possibly useful. She filed him under pattern and moved on. At 1405, she was reassigned from her station near the primary network terminal to a support desk in a hallway alcove that handled document routing. Administrative burial. The kind of reassignment that was designed to look procedural and was actually punitive. She carried her equipment to the new desk without comment and set it up in 4 minutes and 38 seconds. Everything calibrated, every connection verified, every system running at optimal function. The communications officer who walked past at 1412 paused and looked at her setup with the expression of someone who had expected something different and was recalibrating. She was routing documents when the ammunition storage audit came through on a secondary channel, not her channel, not her assignment. But the notation in the routing code was wrong. A transposition error that would have flagged a discrepancy that didn't exist, triggering a formal audit and pulling 2 logistics officers off their actual assignments for 6 hours. She corrected it in 14 seconds. She flagged the correction with the correct authorization code and rerouted it. Nobody asked her to. Nobody knew she had. Reeves, walking past the alcove at 1419 with a tablet pressed against his chest, saw her do it. He saw the speed of the correction. He saw the specific authorization code she had used, a code drawn from a system he had not seen anyone access in this building since his first week on base. A system that was, nominally, above the access level of a support attachment captain. He said nothing. He walked past. He added it to the picture. The picture was getting very clear. At 14:45, she was in the secondary briefing room on a pretext of retrieving misrouted documentation. She needed to be near the data terminal for 40 seconds, and the documentation retrieval gave her the pretext. And the documentation was genuinely misrouted, which she had arranged 3 days earlier by routing it correctly to a location that would require retrieval. When she overheard the conversation through the partition wall, Hale's voice, low and not performing, which meant he thought he was alone or close enough to it. Not a problem. She's a captain with borrowed credentials and a plan her superiors don't know exists. By 1700, the verification request goes through, the credentials fail the extended check, and we have a procedural basis for suspension. Nobody gets hurt, she just goes away. A second voice she didn't recognize. Shorter responses. Agreement. She stood at the filing cabinet and made her face do nothing. Her sleeve was resting against the cabinet edge and had ridden up fractionally on the inside of her forearm. She adjusted it. She controlled her breathing. 4 in, hold 4, 4 out, hold 4. The credentials would not fail the extended check. She knew exactly what the extended check would find. She had built what it would find. But if Hale was moving up his timeline to 1700, she needed to adjust the sequence. Specifically, she needed the missed check-in to register at a slightly accelerated interval, so the inquiry would arrive before his formal suspension request could contaminate the record. She had a 17-minute window. She left the secondary briefing room at 14:47, documentation under her arm. She walked at a pace that was not hurried, not aggressive, the kind of pace that looks like routine. She needed to reach the communications alcove, send a specific 4-character code to a specific encrypted address, and be back at her reassigned desk before anyone thought to check her location. She was back at her desk at 14:51. The 4-character code was sent at 14:49:22. She ate her dinner. She listened to the conversations around her. She was thinking about the 11 routing manifests and the data terminal in Hale's command suite, and the name at the center of the file she had been building for 6 weeks. Chief Warrant Officer Reeves sat down across from her. He didn't ask. He simply placed his tray on the table and sat. She looked up. She did not appear surprised. "You've been watching me since the briefing room," she said. "I've been watching you since the gate," he said. "Your authentication code." She waited. "You inputted the monthly rotation in under 9 seconds," Reeves said. "I've been on 3 bases this year. Our fastest operator takes 4.5 minutes. The manual allows up to 12. He looked at his food. That kind of speed doesn't come from practice. It comes from writing the system. She said nothing. She returned to eating. "I've seen 12 operators in 34 years, Reeves said. 12 that moved like you move, processed like you process. He picked up his fork. 9 of them aren't listed anywhere anymore. They've been classified to the point of administrative non-existence. He set the fork down. "I'm not asking who you are." "Good," she said. "I'm telling you," Reeves said, "to be careful with Hale. He's not stupid. Arrogant, yes, but not stupid. And arrogant men with operational authority and something to hide are the second most dangerous thing on any base." She looked up then, directly at him. Something moved in her expression, not warmth exactly. Recognition. "What's the first?" she asked. An arrogant man with operational authority and something to hide, Reeves said, who's been tipped off that someone is looking. He picked his tray up and left. She watched him go. Her breathing was even. 4 counts. Hold 4. 4 out. Hold 4. The pattern in the conversations had a shape now. Hale was not merely an obstacle. The intelligence file she had built over the previous 6 weeks had a name at the center of it. A brigadier general, 2 captured logistics officers, and 11 routing manifests that traced a supply leak backward through 3 staging posts to a single source. A source that had classified operational movements and sold them selectively for 11 months before the bodies started appearing in ways that didn't match official engagement reports. She knew the source's rank. She knew his base assignment. She had been placed here to confirm the last piece, the digital fingerprint that tied him to a specific data terminal on a specific date. The terminal was in Hale's command suite. She had been in the room with it twice already. At 16:15, Hale filed the formal security review. She was notified by a communications officer who had the decency to look uncomfortable delivering the message. The review cited unauthorized access requests, anomalous authentication behavior, which was a precise way of describing her 9-second code input, she noted, and a pattern of information requests above her documented clearance level. She cooperated. She answered questions in the security office with the same economy she brought to everything else. What were you doing at the classified terminal on the 14th? Running a diagnostic. Under whose authorization? Mine. You don't have authorization level access to that terminal. That's not what my credentials say. The reviewing officer checked his screen. His expression shifted. He checked it again. The kind of double check that happens when a system returns data that contradicts what someone is certain they know. These credentials aren't in our system, he said carefully. They're in a different system, she said. He looked at her. She looked back at him with the particular patience of someone who has said the most important thing in the room and is waiting for the other person to catch up. He excused himself to make a call. She sat with her hands flat on the table. In the hallway outside, she could hear the reviewing officer's voice, low and careful, explaining that something didn't match. A long silence from whoever was on the other end. The kind of silence that precedes a question that changes the shape of a conversation. She controlled her breathing. 4 in. Hold 4. 4 out. Hold 4. Hale had the formal suspension order on her access card within the hour. She surrendered it without comment. She was escorted to a holding room, not a cell technically, but a room that functioned the same way. Concrete walls, metal bench, a window near the ceiling that showed a narrow rectangle of sky going orange at the edges with the late afternoon. The smell of industrial disinfectant over something older and mineral underneath it. She sat down. She looked at her watch. This is the near-fail moment. The point where anyone watching from the outside would think she's finished. Caught, access suspended, credentials challenged. Sitting in a concrete room while the man she came to expose controls the operational space above her head. Game over. Except games have rules. And she's about to show them they have been playing the wrong game from the start. Her watch read 17:31. In 22 minutes, her missed check-in would register on a system no one on this base had clearance to access. That system would initiate a single automated inquiry, a query, technically, routed through 3 separate DoD servers that would return one result: her operating designation, her classification level, and the name of the authority that had placed her here. That name would go to 4 people simultaneously. All 4 of them outranked everyone currently in this building. In 68 minutes, the protocol she had filed 3 months ago, before she set foot on this base, before anyone knew her name, before Hale had ever looked at her across a briefing table, would activate automatically. The protocol was simple. If she was detained or had her access suspended without a resolution code entered by one of two authorized officers, neither of whom was Hale, and both of whom were currently 2 time zones away, the file she had been building for 6 weeks would upload in full to a secure federal server and flag for immediate review. In approximately 2.5 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale was going to learn the difference between operational authority and classified federal mandate. She had planned this 3 months ago. Nobody had thought to take her watch. She settled back against the concrete wall, looked at the rectangle of sky through the high window. The orange was deepening toward red. She breathed. 4 in, hold 4, 4 out, hold 4. She thought about the 11 routing manifests, the logistics officers, the bodies that appeared in ways that didn't match official engagement reports. She thought about a unit, 12 operators, 1 surviving family notification that had been sealed and reclassified within 48 hours, whose after-action report had been quietly buried 4 years ago. She had read that report. She had read the classified version, the one that used real names and real sequences. She knew what it said. She was here because of what it said. She was also here because she had been the 13th operator on that mission, the one officially listed as killed in action. She looked at her watch again. The sky through the high window was going dark at the edges. 21 minutes. Reeves heard the name first. He was at the secondary communications terminal, the same position he had occupied all day. The corner that gave him sight lines to 3 separate access points and the main briefing room corridor. When the automated inquiry pinged through, he was one of 4 people on this base who had access to the system it came from, a legacy protocol designation from a joint task force that had been dissolved officially 7 years ago. He saw the operating designation. He read it twice. He had seen that designation once before, in a classified after-action report, for a mission that had officially ended with 12 casualties and 0 survivors. He sat very still for a moment. The kind of still that comes from the same place hers did. Then he stood up. He walked to the door of the communications room and looked down the corridor toward Hale's command suite. Hale was visible through the glass, standing, talking, confident, the way a man looks when he believes he has just resolved a complication. A man who was about to understand what the word complication actually meant. Reeves found the duty officer at the secondary desk. "I'd be very careful," Reeves said quietly, "about whatever's happening in that holding room." The duty officer looked at him. "The access suspension is formal, sir." Colonel Hale ordered. "I know what Colonel Hale ordered," Reeves said. "I'm telling you to be very careful." He walked back to his terminal. He sat down. He waited. At 17:53, the second ping came through. Not a query this time. A directive. He read it carefully. Then he read it again. His jaw tightened. His hand moved toward his radio without fully deciding to. At 17:58, the first vehicle came through the main gate. Not a standard transport vehicle. Not supply. The kind of vehicle that carries people who are here on specific business. The kind of vehicle that gets logged in a different system than the one Hale's team controlled. The second vehicle followed 40 seconds behind it. And the third. By 18:03, 4 of them were parked in a row outside the main building. Dark, unmarked, government-plated. And the people getting out of them were moving with a specific purpose that signals this is not a social call. Hale saw them from the command suite window. Something shifted in his face. The performance stopped. The audience awareness shut off. What was left underneath it was something smaller and quieter. His blood ran cold. He went to the door. He opened it. He looked down the corridor at the approaching figures, 4 in dress uniform, 2 in civilian clothes, carrying federal identification that they were not attempting to conceal. And something happened to his voice before he used it. "What is this?" he said. It came out wrong, too quiet for a man who performed everything at volume. The senior figure in dress uniform, 3 stars on his shoulder, a face Hale recognized from congressional hearing footage, looked at him without particular interest. "We're here for Captain Vasquez," the general said. "Where is she?" The door to the holding room opened at 1809. She stood up without being asked. She already knew what the timeline meant. The general, 3 stars, the kind of face that had navigated 11 years of interagency conflict and come out still standing, looked at her for a moment. He was taking in the concrete room, the metal bench, the high window. His expression did not change, but something around his eyes tightened in a way that suggested he was filing the details. "Your check-in missed," he said. "It was supposed to," she said. He nodded slowly. He turned and led her out into the corridor. Hale was in the corridor. He had not moved. He was standing approximately 6 feet from where he had been when the general arrived, the kind of frozen position a body holds when the mind is still processing. His face had cycled through 3 states in the last 4 minutes. Surprise, which had looked genuine. Something that resembled denial, which had lasted less than 30 seconds. And then something that looked in the specific way of a man who has spent a career being certain, like genuine fear. The general stepped aside. Vasquez walked into the corridor and stopped. She looked at Hale. 47 people were in the building. Word moved on military bases faster than radio. The corridor had people in it who had not been there 4 minutes ago. Hands flat against walls, bodies oriented toward the scene, the way people orient themselves toward something they know they are going to remember. No one was laughing. Hale's eyes moved to her sleeve. Her sleeve had ridden up slightly during the walk, not much, just enough. On the inside of her left forearm, below the elbow, there was a tattoo. Not decorative, not personal. A classified tactical insignia, 6 lines forming a specific geometric configuration, centered on a designation that had not been publicly acknowledged by any branch of the military in 7 years. Because the unit that had used it had been officially dissolved following an operation that had officially produced 0 survivors. The Ranger Master Chief standing behind Hale's right shoulder made a sound. Involuntary, short. The kind of sound a man makes when something hits him that he wasn't braced for. His hand drifted, trembled actually, visibly, and then went rigid at his side. He had recognized the insignia. So had Reeves. Reeves was standing at the far end of the corridor, where he had positioned himself 11 minutes ago when the vehicles arrived. He was watching her forearm. He was watching it with the focused stillness of a man looking at something he thought he had read about and never expected to see in person. The room detonated. Not loudly. Gasps, actual audible gasps, rippled through the corridor from multiple personnel. Someone at the back of the crowd dropped a tablet computer. The clatter bounced off the concrete walls like a gunshot, and then the silence rushed in behind it and filled everything. And the silence was the kind that has weight and texture and sound of its own, the AC system suddenly deafening in it. A boot scuffing the floor near the back, a chair scraping somewhere behind the command suite door. Total. The general looked at Hale. Then he looked at the assembled personnel in the corridor. "For the record," he said, and his voice was the kind that did not need volume to carry, "Captain Vasquez holds a classified operations designation at a level above the clearance of everyone in this building, myself included. She operates under a standing federal mandate assigned through a joint task force authority that predates this base's current command structure by 4 years. He paused. Every person in this building, including myself, answers to her operational authority on this mission. He raised his hand. The salute was slow, precise. His hand moved with the deliberateness of a formal military acknowledgement. Wrist straight, fingers flat, the crisp angle of complete institutional respect. It traveled from his side to his forehead in the specific way of a man who has performed the gesture 10,000 times and means it exactly this once. The federal agent on his left raised his hand. Then the agent on his right. The Ranger Master Chief. Then the 3 Stars aide. Then the communications officer who had taken her card earlier. He raised it first of all the base personnel, and his face had the specific look of a man who would spend the next 20 years remembering this moment. Down the corridor, person by person, hands rose. 43 people. Specific count, every one of them. Hale was the last. He didn't move for a long moment. The hands around him were raised, and he stood among them like something the tide had left behind. His jaw was tight. His face had stopped cycling. It had arrived somewhere quiet, not theatrical, just quiet. His hand came up slowly. It was not precise. The angle was wrong. It didn't matter. It was the gesture that mattered, the gesture that said the game was over, and the rules had been there the whole time, and he had simply not known them. She did not salute back. That was not how this worked. She looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then she looked at the general. "The terminal," she said. "I need access to the command suite for approximately 8 minutes." "Of course," the general said. She walked past Hale. He stepped back. Not deliberately. His body just moved. The way bodies move when something approaches that they instinctively categorize as greater than themselves. She did not look at him again. In the command suite, in 8 minutes and 40 seconds, she completed the final extraction of the data she had come for. The digital fingerprint tied the terminal, the routing manifests, and 11 months of classified movement data to a single user identification code. The code resolved through 3 authentication layers to a name, a rank, a base assignment. She was not surprised by the name. She had suspected it for 6 weeks. Confirmation was not surprise. Confirmation was evidence. She filed the complete intelligence package to the federal server. She watched the upload confirm. She stood up. Justice was institutional, not theatrical. In the corridor, she could hear voices, formal, clipped, the specific register of official consequences being administered. Hale's voice briefly responding, then not responding. The sound of boots on concrete moving in formation. She did not go back to watch. She was already thinking about the next phase. Reeves was waiting by the secondary exit. He was the only person left in that part of the corridor. She stopped. She looked at him. "You could have said something," she said. "In the mess hall, you knew." "I guessed," he said. "There's a difference." "You guessed correctly." 34 years, he said. "Pattern recognition improves." He looked at his boots for a moment. When he looked up, something in his face was different, not soft, exactly, but open in the way that comes from age and choosing to let things matter. "The unit," he said quietly. "From the after-action report, the one listed as a total loss." She waited. "I knew 2 of them," Reeves said. "Knew their families, attended the services." He paused. The services that were closed casket, because there was nothing to put in the caskets. She said nothing. She did not need to. She stood there and let him have the moment he was asking for, because it cost her nothing and it meant something to him. And 34 years of noticing things while everyone else missed them had earned him at least that. "I'm glad," he said finally, "that one of you made it back." He looked at her once more, directly, the way men look at people they know they are not going to see again and want to see clearly one last time. Then he turned and walked away. She watched him go. They had mocked her plan. They had forgotten she had filed it 3 months before she walked through the gate. At 2017, she stood at the edge of the operations building, in a narrow space between two prefabricated structures that gave a clear sight line to the western perimeter. The sky above the base had gone dark, the last band of deep orange crushed flat at the horizon. Her watch read 2017-43. The air smelled of cooling concrete and something that might have been a distant cook fire. She looked at the horizon for a moment. Justice isn't loud. It's patient. From the perimeter to the south, she could see the maintenance lights blinking on the vehicle compound where 3 dark government sedans were preparing to leave with passengers they had not arrived with. Institutional consequences. Procedural. Quiet, the way things are when they are real. Hale had been escorted to a vehicle at 1938. He had not said anything worth repeating. Her encrypted communication device showed 3 messages. 2 were confirmations. The data package received. The upload verified. The warrant issued for a name 3 levels above Hale in the chain she had been tracing. The 3rd message was shorter. It was a surveillance image. Source logged as Signals Intelligence Aerial Collection. Time-stamped 4 days ago. A rooftop. Geographic markers indicating a location northeast of Damascus. In the image, barely visible at the edge of the frame, a figure in a hat that shielded his face from the camera. The posture, the specific cut of a coat she had seen before in a different country, on a man who was supposed to be in federal custody. He wasn't. She looked at the image for a long time. She zoomed in on the posture, on the coat, on the angle of the hat. The warrant she had filed today covered 11 months of activity and 4 linked personnel. This name was not on it. This name wasn't on any list yet, officially, because no one officially knew he was still operating. She knew. She closed the image. She looked back at the horizon, at the last orange line going dark. Tomorrow brings new ghosts to hunt. She put the device in her pocket. She breathed. 4 in, hold 4, 4 out, hold 4. Then she walked back inside. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to MVP Stories for more.